Hi everyone, and thanks so much for having me. I've loved hearing everybody's presentations, and I feel that everybody has had a little piece of something for me, either to make me feel good about what Internews does, or to make me wonder and question more about what Internews does in the misinformation space. Internews is not a news agency. Internews is an international non-profit that works through partners in media and tech in more than 70 countries worldwide to try to ensure safe access to timely, reliable, fact-checked information that can help people make informed decisions about their lives, participate in their communities, and hold power to account. For the last 6 or 7 years, I've been in charge of responding in the information space to humanitarian crises, including Ebola in West Africa, Guinea and Liberia, the Nepal earthquake, the Mediterranean refugee response, Hurricane Matthew in Haiti, and then Ebola again in Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm going to share, we are preparing right now, or doing our best to design a response to the coronavirus. I'm not going to speak so specifically as to what that might be, as to talk a little bit about where we come from in this arc of learning towards designing for a situation which bears similarity to other situations we have dealt with, but comes with a new set of complications. That's always the fabulous thing about these kinds of emergencies. They're always different. Simply put, what we know is that in humanitarian and public health emergencies, information is at a premium. Demand is high in times of uncertainty. Supply may be wiped out in the case of conflict or natural disaster. In the case of public health emergencies, very often it's more about the supply of information being controlled or being of poor quality or being corrupted by rumor and misinformation. We love facts. The overwhelming amount of work that we do is with local media partners in the countries where we work. I'm a journalist by background, so facts are fundamentally important. We love the International Fact-Checking Network. We were so happy to see the launch of it a couple of weeks ago. It's a perfect point of departure for us. So anything that I'm going to say about facts in my presentation is by no means suggesting that we don't need them. But Internews very much picks up where the fact-checkers leave off, and if we don't have to necessarily do our own fact-checking, that's a wonderful thing. Many of our media partners in countries where we work have existing relationships with the fact-checking networks, for instance, in Indonesia. So this is what we like to think. This was the way that things ideally would be: big fat facts and small skinny rumors. What it often feels like when we get to the ground is this is the kind of situation we've basically been discussing all morning, and we generally think that, yes, I love it when people take photographs, thank you. What we generally think of as the first recourse in this situation is that. That's what we think we should do. That's in fact where we went into the Ebola crisis in Liberia. We went in to do the typical kind of work that we would do with journalists in a crisis-hit community, and that is to rally them around, put them together with experts, give them more facts, inform them better on the matter of science and public health. They quickly became acquainted, of course, with the public health service information with which Liberia was bombarded. I mean, when you say wall to wall, it was literally, if you've seen photographs of that time, there wasn't a wall space that did not have a public health message on it. The messages were few and simple: wash your hands, don't touch the bodies, use the chlorine water that's provided for you. So there was no corner of that country that was untouched by the basic facts, the health information messages that were given to people. However, this is where the kind of glitch in the machine comes in. At some point in time, it became clear that there were in Liberia what people called resistant communities. And for the first time, medical anthropologists were actually called in to advise WHO and others on what this might be. Internews' experience in crisis after crisis is that this place here, I'm going to use this, no, I'm not, natty little, no. My actual concern, the small voice there, is where the trust factor comes in. Because regardless of what the facts are and whether individuals or communities have access to those facts, if there isn't somebody to address the actual concern, which may or may not be related to the medical facts, not paying attention to my actual concern breeds, typically in communities, a lack of trust in those who are trying to convey the facts. And this may be your local government, your national government, or in the situations where we work, a big health agency. And this lack of trust in facts, I think, as others have pointed out this morning, can be as dangerous as an absence of facts. So what we find in these kinds of situations when we go in to give people facts, or fact-based, primarily fact-based information, is that we, those who are looking to counter misinformation, are focusing on what we know. And there's a kind of inbuilt assumption there that what we know is what they need to know. And that's usually the point of departure when we go to do our very well-intentioned work. Internews, we don't worry too much about the what is the source approach. It's labor-intensive, and we have other labor-intensive work and very small resources. So this business of identifying the source, discrediting sources, is a little bit of a whack-a-mole as far as we're concerned in terms of how we would use our resources. It's of potentially limited use because there will always be more sources. And controlling the information or controlling the message tends to smack of spin. And even in countries where people are not very well educated or even literate, they certainly do have a good sense of who might be trying to sell them a message. And so that's where we come back down to the trust business. So when we go into communities, and I have to say that there is an issue of scale here, if we're looking at misinformation at scale in any given country, we would be seeking to work with the media in that country. That would be independent media, local language media, large scale, i.e. in Thailand, the Public Broadcasting Corporation, for instance, with whom we have a relationship. Preferably when we're talking about public health emergencies, we would look for the most vulnerable or most affected populations and go to their local media, a community radio station, which would be a powerful potential ally in that localized information ecosystem. So when we go in there, we are looking at, oh, I see, yes, I've got the, what does it sound like? Self-centered, shooting the messenger and spinning, right. So what we focus on is what do people talk about? Because what people talk about can be very, very revealing. And when we realized in Liberia that the amount of factual and fact-based stories that our journalism partners could get out was just being completely swamped by the word on the street, on the grapevine, through social media, even in the tiniest village, by word of mouth, we realized that we had to develop a new kind of programming to deal with that. And we got together with UNICEF, who had health workers going door to door in these affected villages, to give them yet again the facts and the public health service messages. And we asked them to stick around and just kind of say, other than Ebola, what's up? What's going on? What else are you worried about? And we found, amazingly, that there was a lot of information which, had that health worker not stuck around and just kind of kicked the can around with those people for a little while, a lot of information that was extremely interesting about what people's real concerns were, that were not about necessarily what is Ebola, explain germ theory to me, but about schools, about government corruption, about roads, about trade, about food, about voodoo, about magic, about economics. And we call that Ebola-related content. Now, it's not necessarily public health content, but it has a lot of really interesting implications for how the response to that crisis will go and how messaging may be adjusted. The message of Ebola kills, for instance, was really not helpful when people started to survive Ebola. It completely undermined the major public health service message that that response had relied upon, and sowed mistrust among people who were then like, hey, you know, we are now not inclined to believe anything that you say. How do people talk about it? What language do they use? And why do they talk about it? Is as interesting, because the business of rumor is so rich. It's so revealing of what people's real fears are. Fear has been mentioned a lot in the room today. People in unstable or weak democracies where there are weak health systems, where there's been a civil war, for instance, and where there are always deep cultural, perhaps religious, political reasons why people are predisposed to believe a rumor. That is much more interesting to us than where that rumor came from, what the agenda was of the person who sowed the rumor in the first place, if it was deliberate. But when people are asking questions, it is revealing of their fear, and it reveals an information gap. What do they really want to know? And if you can meet that information gap, you have a half a chance of establishing trust with those people, through which you then may start to drip feed your facts with a greater certainty that they are going to actually pick it up, because trust is everything in this business. So demand-driven, localized news. So the fact-checking network is fabulous. We use those facts, but we need to localize down to the most affected communities. It's very difficult with the coronavirus to decide where exactly those are, because everybody seems to be vulnerable to the infodemic. But in due course, it may become evident where the most at-risk communities are. You need to get down there and understand their localized information ecosystem and try to work within that to address it. For Internews, what is a rumor? It can be a, hey, did you hear? It can be a criticism. They're trying to make money out of this. There's an agenda behind it, a general throwaway comment, or is it true that, or I heard that, or have you heard, or did you know? That kind of peek behind the secret. I'm letting you in on a secret here, which somebody described brilliantly earlier. It's a data point. For Internews, a rumor or a conversation, a concern is a data point. These come from Nepal, from Haiti, and from Greece, respectively. These are rumors. We call them rumors as a shorthand. It sounds wild, like a rumor is like a wacky thing, but it's not really. It's just, it's a concern of some sort. These are the information services that we bring. We assess local information ecosystems to understand who the influencers are, because in the chaos of social media in particular, influencers are super important. In local communities and faraway places, they tend to have a different flavor, but it's super important to have those people on board. Engaging with local media is always going to be important. Communication with communities is a two-way process. This is not messaging, which we have already established is not necessarily helpful. It's always ensuring that wherever you are delivering some information to somebody, there is a clear path for that person to speak back to you, to ask their question, to express their particular idiosyncratic little concern, and that you will go away and you will come back the following week with the additional information that that person used, which is exactly what we did in Liberia. So the key, I would say here, bullet point 2, the key is to have a conversation, not to do another survey or assessment. So we literally, I think the anthropologists and social scientists that we work with call it deep hanging out. It is really that kind of shooting the breeze on the doorstep stuff. Rumor is everywhere. People love to talk about what they heard today because they do have fear and they want to check it. That's the stuff that we're interested in. So we have teams going out into communities. They may not be into news. We don't have armies of people everywhere, but we might partner with the Red Cross, for instance, or UNICEF, or people who do have boots on the ground who are face-to-face with many, many people. And we just ask them to keep their ears open and gather. And then, so we collect all of these data points. Open questioning is very important as opposed to survey tick box questioning. Let the conversation flow. This is what those data points look like when they're tracked. We don't need to know people's names. We don't need to know where they came from. So data security-wise, it's relatively light. And we do not pick what the most important rumors are. It's not about prevalence, because it really doesn't matter if most people believe that the moon is made of green cheese, but it might matter if somebody believes that this border is open and they can cross it when they can't, or that it's safe to bury a body after Ebola. Those are going to be dangerous courses of action. So in analyzing this data, we have to make a kind of a journalistic, almost editorial decisions about which rumors, even if small, may lead to endangering behaviors. These are the kinds of places that we go to look for quotes, commentary, fact-checking, etc. And now we have our fact-checking network partners, which is wonderful. These are typically the kind of people we would go to. And we produce bulletins for the community. The bulletins reflect back the rumor in exactly the way it was expressed to us, in the lingo, in the local lingo of the place. In Liberia, it was called they say, which is they say, which is the local, slang for the word on the street, or sac di, sac fray in Haiti, what is said and what is true. We create a bulletin that goes to local media, local influencers, local content producers, whoever they may be, imams and others. And then for humanitarians, this is really important. This could be local government, it could be national government, it could be, this is for service providers, because service providers find it so fascinating and useful to understand what people are saying, because very often they're not saying anything necessarily about the virus itself, but they're saying something about the quality of service and information that they're receiving and the level of trust that they have in it. So we have, there it is, the rumor at the top, anonymous but with a reference to location. Here comes the fact that we have fact-checked somehow with a quote, and then we have a referral. Here you can go for more information. Here you can go to find somebody who will take action for you. And so this loop needs to continue. We never take data from people without going back to them with some sorts of answers, referrals, and information for follow-up. And I assume because you're standing there, my time is out. Thanks.